Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a Market Research Podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard. Today, we're joined by Geoff Lowe, the Head of Sales at InfoTools. Geoff has been involved in consumer insights in various ways since 1986. He is driven by the vision to help researchers realize the potential in the data they're collecting. He believes knowledge is power, but shared knowledge is superpower. Geoff is going to display some of the knowledge he's acquired around data enlightenment and what that means in the world of market research. Thanks for joining us on the show today, Geoff.
Absolute pleasure, Michael.
Cool. So, Geoff, what's the most significant thing you're going to tell us today, which we'll unpack throughout this episode?
This is something that I'm really passionate about, Michael. It's in this industry that we're in, the research industry, the way that we do things has historically been, and in fact it still is, quite fragmented and sequential, as opposed to the opposite of that, which would be integrated and iterative. And because of that, I think as an industry, we're leaving a huge amount of value on the table. And what I think is that the more that we can collaborate with each other within the industry, but also between ourselves and our clients, the more that we can do in real time, and therefore the more that we can create, the more value we can create as an industry.
Sure. What do you mean by fragmented and then like the sequential?
So just think about the way a typical market research project plays out. You've got a client that expresses a need. They want to understand something. They want to find something out. And so a researcher will design some research. They'll design a questionnaire and a methodology that is designed to help the client gain the understanding that they need. We then implement the research. We then get the data that flows in all sorted, shaped up, data processed. We analyze the findings, we visualize them, and then we report those results to the clients. Now, that's an incredibly sequential sequence of things that happen. It's an oversimplified version of it, but that's pretty much how every research project goes. And with each step of that sequence, when each step is undertaken by different people, there's an incredibly fragmentation to the process. So you've got one group of people who designs the questionnaire. You've got somebody else who organizes and shapes and designs the data. You've got maybe another team or another person who does the analysis. You've got maybe somebody else who does the visualization, maybe even another team that puts the report together from those visualizations tables, and then another team, it's the client-facing team, that actually does the presentation to the client. That fragmentation, the fragmentation of that sequence of events is incredibly costly. It costs you in terms of efficiency because you're constantly handing over to somebody else. Data and the results from data is constantly moving from one system to another. So it costs you in terms of just efficiency, in terms of the speed with which you can get things done, but it also costs you in terms of the quality of the results that can come out at the end of the day. So efficiency, timing, and poor results because you don't have one overriding view of the whole thing. So that with the end value creation in mind.
And obviously there's a huge time between sort of start and finish between all of that as well. So if any opportunities were to arise, you'd struggle to take advantage of them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially now, more and more now, there is an expectation that things happen at a very fast cadence. I mean, back in the day, when I first started in research back in the 80s, there was a 3 or 4 month turnaround from getting the data out of field to getting it presented to the client was pretty standard. Now, 3 or 4 days is considered long, and I think in some cases 3 or 4 hours even is too long. And so that fragmented sequence of steps in the research process simply can't work anymore. It's just not fit for purpose for the fast turnaround that we all expect now.
Yes. So how then have you seen organizations attempting to solve this issue then?
Well, there's a couple of things that we see happening very slowly, frustratingly slowly, but let's just talk in terms of what I think needs to happen. In the first instance, I think within research organizations, we need to work more in parallel rather than in sequence. In other words, we need to, as the same people need to be involved in the designing of the questionnaire and the designing of the data, the shaping of the data, and the shaping of the data needs to be done with its purpose in mind. So you're shaping the data because you want to use it for a particular kind of analysis, which will answer particular questions, which will generate the understanding that you want. And so, and of course, that applies to the design of the questionnaire as well. And it equally applies to the analysis that you're going to do, which depends on the shaping of the data that you've just done, which then determines the reporting that you're going to do. If you do reporting at all, this is another question I think we should go into. And that reporting will of course feed the building of the understanding that the client ultimately wants. Now, historically, you've had different teams with different skill sets using different technologies at each step of the process, and that's because that was how the technology was. It was inherently fragmented. But now there are technology options available to us that mean that you don't have to be deeply skilled, even in the writing of a questionnaire, certainly in the shaping of data, although that does help a little bit. You don't have to be a real nerd when it comes to data analysis or an incredibly talented, well, actually, you do need to have some visual capabilities to create nice visuals. But technology means that that each step of this process has been democratized and continues to be democratized. So you can have fewer people or even the same team that can see a project through from beginning to end. And when you've got that integration of the same people, the same team, integrated team working across the whole process, the end goal, the generation of understanding, which is where the value is created or the value is accrued at the client, that is kept in mind the whole way without break. And I think that's probably the first thing that we need to do is work more collaboratively as a team within research organizations. And as I say, technology is now being developed and is here now that facilitates that. The second thing is, this is a little bit harder because it means bringing the clients into the process, and there are sort of barriers to that. There are barriers on the research side and also barriers on the client side. But let's just talk through what do I mean by this? The ultimate purpose of doing market research is to generate understanding. It's only when a client gains an understanding and then takes a positive action in their business from that understanding that makes a positive difference in their business. That's the only time that value or all of the cost that has been invested in market research is realized. Until a good action is taken and a positive result happens in a business, everything up until that point is pure cost. There is no value creation at all. Now, so if we consider from a research point of view, the ultimate goal of market research is the generation of the understanding. We can't really take it to the next step. We can't really do the actions. That's for our clients to do. So the ultimate value creation for us is in the generation of the understanding. If that is our goal, the understanding that is born from personal discovery is so much more powerful than understanding that has been shared by somebody else. So if I, as a researcher, go through this process I described and do some analysis and gain the understanding myself, and then pass my understanding onto my client in the form of a presentation, maybe supported by a PowerPoint deck or a set of tables perhaps, or even a written report, that has far less impact it's far less likely to flow through to positive actions in the business than if the client themselves is intimately involved in the process and is personally involved in discovering insights and gaining that understanding themselves. So the second thing that I think we need to be working on is bringing the clients much more explicitly into this process. And that means creating an environment where clients themselves can investigate the data and the fruit of the researcher's labor and discover things for themselves, because when they discover them themselves, they're far more likely to feel an ownership of it, far more likely to be invested in it, and far more likely to pass it through to their organization so that good things can happen. So I've given you two answers to the question there. One is we've got to be more collaborative and integrated as a research industry, and technology is allowing that. And we need to make sure the client is intimately involved in that process and is in a position to personally discover things themselves. Now, I said there's some barriers to that. One is this is involving the client. Researchers tend to be quite protective of their patch and defensive of their the level of expertise they have in market research data, and that means that they are reluctant generally to bringing clients into the process. In other words, making the data available to the clients for them to analyze it, investigate it themselves. I think as a group, we researchers need to get over ourselves in that regard. And technology, again, is helping with that process, because the tools that we have available to us now are so easy to use. They are so orientated towards the less skilled user that it's absolutely realistic for even non-research literate people to get really great value out of the data using modern tools. So that's the first barrier. The second barrier is on the other side, and that is a lot of clients expect, and I guess this is kind of this is the other side to exactly the same coin. A lot of clients expect exactly what the researchers want, and that is that the researchers do the discovery, gain the understanding, and then pass it on. And from a client's point of view, I'll pay you the money, you give me the understanding. I think that from a client's point of view, they need to understand that a little bit of their time invested in being part of the discovery is really well spent. It's a good investment of their time to be part of that discovery, because they will have a much greater understanding at the end of the day. And as I said, it's going to lead to, it's much more likely to good things happening in the business. So I think as a group, we need to, this in terms of getting clients involved as researchers, we need to be open to that, and we need to encourage clients to be part of the process, to put some work in and own the process themselves.
Well, there's been such a push for knowing your customer, hasn't there? And it falls directly in there. And I guess with market research, survey data is one particular piece of data that people can get in and explore, but there's also many other data sets, etc., that they can have access to, which can inform that picture, getting in and exploring, isn't there?
Yeah, so multiple sources of data. You're thinking things like customer experience, sales data, that sort of thing.
Behavioral
data, yeah, social data, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's another dimension to what we're talking about here, because all of the principles that we're talking about in terms of collaboration internally within an agency and bringing the clients in to be part of the process, that gets amplified when the data that you're talking about is from multiple sources. So obviously in the world of the market researcher, its primary survey data is our bread and butter, but more and more our clients are they're kind of trying to drink from the fire hose, aren't they, with the absolute torrent of data that's available to them. And again, the tools, the technology that's available to us now makes that realistic. There are tools that allow us to to be able to distill the value from huge volumes of non-research data. And then there's also technology available to bring all of that data together. And I would argue that exactly the same benefits accrue when you've got multiple sources of data, as I described, for just a single source of survey data. In fact, I would say, and I think this is what you're driving at, Michael, is that it's even more so. As researchers, helping our clients get even more value from their data by bringing lots of sources together, but including them in the process, I think is, we talked about knowledge as power in your introduction, which I've got to actually, before I go on, I've got to credit Stan Stinanathan, who is recently retired, but I knew him for years when we worked with him at Coca-Cola. He is my mentor, the person that I look up to in the industry that introduced that concept to me. Not knowing, simply passing that information on from multiple sources, including the survey, to our clients, that's knowledge and that's power. But doing it with them involved in the process, with the clients intimately involved in the discovery, that is superpower.
So you talked about those two barriers prior. How can we overcome them?
That is a $64,000 question. I think we need to, as researchers, we need to, and I've kind of already mentioned this, we need to keep our eye on the prize. What is the prize? What is it that we're actually, what is our reason for being? Why is there an insights industry, a market research industry? It's because there's a whole bunch of people, companies out there who are trying to understand their world. What are we expert at? We are expert at helping people understand their world. So a client needs to understand their customers, their competitors' customers, the impression people have of their products, of their competitors' products, what they do with their products, who they do it with, all of those things. They need to understand those things. As researchers, we're experts at that. So I think ultimately we are in the game of generating understanding. And if our clients better understand their world, the part of the world that they care about, they are going to do better things in their businesses. And ultimately that means that that their customers, all of us actually, we're all customers as well as researchers and clients, we will be better served. So our ultimate goal is to generate understanding. When our clients have a better understanding of their world, they will do better things, and ultimately everyone is better served because there is a much better match between what people need, absolutely need, not just want, but need, and what is being delivered. I'm not exactly answering the question here because I'm restating the value of actually doing this. But let me just continue, and then I'll get back to how. Because when that happens, the total value that is created by our industry is greater, and therefore the value of what we do, the value that our clients see in us as an industry increases. How do we do it? I think we need to simply continue the conversation. In our position, we're constantly talking to researchers and clients alike. I've had a similar conversation to this with Ray Pointer, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who asks because I'm passionate about this. I think that is the answer. We keep needing to encourage researchers to collaborate with each other, and we need to encourage clients to be part of the process.
Cool. So if we just think on the horizon now for the next 2 to 3 years, what's ahead for us in this space?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it as the future. Interestingly, we started in this game over 30 years ago, and we built our business on the premise that I've been describing today, actually 30 years ago, that it's far more valuable for the person who is actually going to be acting on the information to be part of analyzing the information. And so, we built a platform that facilitated that. And now 30 years later, I find myself still talking with passion about that same goal. And we know that there is value in it because we've built a really successful business over 30 years based on that quite simple premise. Mm. I think the difference between then 30 years ago and now, and say, let's not say the next 30 years, but let's say the next, say, 5 years, is that technology is growing. The technology available to us is growing so much faster now than it was then. I think it's an S curve with a very, very long, low, flat beginning to the S curve, and I think I detect that we are just on the cusp of starting the very steep part of the S curve in terms of the growth of this of integration of systems, integration of people's roles, and integration of clients and researchers together, because of the technology is facilitating it. As I said earlier, there are platforms now which are becoming ubiquitous, which means that you no longer have to be an expert at each part of the process in order to do each part of the process, and that's so much more powerful. So I say within the next 3 years, I think there will be a tremendous disruption of existing systems. So there are large and small market research companies out there that are structured in a way that you've got a team that does data processing, a team that does analysis, and another team that does reporting. That structure, I think, is going to be massively disrupted by technology. And so instead of having separate sequential teams, we're going to have parallel lines where individual teams will follow the process from beginning to end, project by project, client by client. And that's going to be supported by technology. That's my prediction. Cool. 3 years, 5 years, definitely. I say 3 years.
Okay, so just thinking off the top of your head, then, can you shed any light on what customers' lives, researchers' lives are looking now who have gone and implemented or started implementing some of this, and what's different now to when they from prior to implementing them?
I can draw on that 30 years of experience to answer that, actually, because as I said, we've been working on this principle for the longest time. And as I said, I credited Stan Stunnanathan with knowledge is power, shared knowledge is superpower. He got it very early on that he wanted his team, and these are the clients, right? Coca-Cola is the client of multiple market research agencies. He wanted his team, and not just his insights and knowledge team, but also his brand team, the marketing teams, to have hands-on the data. And if you look back at the amazing growth that the Coca-Cola company had through the early, or right through the 2000s, and in fact, they're still going gangbusters today. I think that's an example of the sort of success that this approach can take. The alternative is you keep the keys to the kingdom locked up, or you keep the kingdom locked up and the keys hidden away. The kingdom being the rich data that comes from surveys and market research. You keep that locked up, then there's so much potential that isn't getting out there. We could talk about any number of clients that have come on board and have embraced the principles as a standard, and we could look at the success that they've had. So I suspect that, and from a client's point of view, it's easy to see because, as I said earlier, where the client is, that's where the value is accruing, and so the client is prepared to or can afford and wants to pay for the in terms of investing their time, that is, for the benefit that they get from that better understanding and greater knowledge of what's going on in their world. The alternative is that they simply are recipients of information from the researchers, which is a lot shallower. They're going to be a lot less invested in the decisions that they take and the actions that decisions they make and the actions they take from those decisions. And I think things will continue to go slowly if that is maintained. I don't think that's viable. I really think that the integration, the collaboration that I'm talking about just has to happen. I don't think there's any choice.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Okay, well, if I can summarize what we've talked today, you covered off how the industry is currently working rather in fragmented and sequential ways, and that definitely slows down the process to value and even the value itself. We've talked about the potential solution of that, where we get clients and stakeholders involved in the discovery and understanding of the insights and the data that they're looking into. And by doing that, they'll get a better grasp of what's happening in their customers, in the market mind, etc., and then be able to put action, something down on paper as a result of what they've been able to do. We've talked about some of the barriers of this happening. The research is holding on to the kingdom, as you talked, and then also some technology and disparate systems as well, and undemocratic processes, if you will.
I know what you mean by that.
Just being a blocker. And so, yeah, with those barriers, like we've said, is that mindset change, expectations across the industry as well. A bit of a transformation required, but for those people that have done so, there's a lot of fruit and enjoyment and joie de vivre back into that as well. And some interest.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's an angle that I hadn't explicitly thought of, but it's far more satisfying, personally satisfying as well, right?
Yeah.
Joyful, joie de vivre. If you're the one that's actually doing the discovery and you're acting on a discovery that you made yourself, that is so much more fun.
Yeah,
good point.
True. So I'm pretty sure that covers it all, right, Geoff?
I think so. I really appreciate you asking the questions. It's gotten me to think about things what I hope is an interesting way for everybody.
Thank you. And a big thanks for joining us on today's episode, and also for your listeners out there. If you've liked what you've heard today, please subscribe to the podcast. Feel free to share it with others who might also find it helpful. Also, feel free to get in touch if you'd like to be on the show as well. So thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.